This is Leadership Beyond, your community of conversation.
But this is the first time in my professional career that everybody, 100% of us, are consciously aware we are engaged in the change initiative.
Yeah, everything. I mean, COVID caused us all to go through change, right? At the same time, but our experiences were so different.
Facing these unprecedented times in isolation is pure insanity.
Joining us today is Robert Snyder. He's a 30-year veteran of project management and the performing arts. His goals for the innovation community are to make healthy change straightforward and innovation success inevitable. He hears the dissatisfaction with poor employee experience and unacceptable project failure rates and knows firsthand the limitations of software-centric methodologies. Robert believes innovation professionals are ready for a fresh methodology that confidently administers unusually rigorous discipline and empathy. Robert's career path includes consulting in corporate roles, PMP and Agile certifications, and countless performances in vocal, dance, and theater ensembles. Robert earned his BS in electrical engineering from the University of Illinois and his MBA in strategy and analytical consulting from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University.
I really like the way Robert is able to draw examples from all of the performing arts and relate it in an accessible way to our business challenges. And I use the word accessible because I feel like I can apply this right where I am on what I'm working on.
I agree. So many times we have heard analogies between business concepts and the performing arts, dance or theater. And yet Robert brings a fresh way to explain those connections that can really resonate with business leaders. Welcome, Robert.
Good morning, Robert. Thanks for joining us.
Delighted to be here.
Robert, this one's been a long time coming. We've been talking about doing this podcast for a little while. Right when I think you were just starting to pull your book together. And I said, great, when you're ready, let's do a podcast. And so here we are. So yay, we get to celebrate that.
Thank you.
So the working title of your book coming in, we'll say 2023, that gives you a little leeway, right?
Yeah.
Innovation Excellence, Transcending Agile with Ruthlessness and Grace.
Innovation Elegance.
Elegance. What did I say? I don't know, but it wasn't right. Innovation Elegance.
It's a common, people just gravitate toward innovation excellence. But my point is that if we're going to bring in the performing arts to this, let's not shy away from, there's a time and place to accept messiness, and there's a time and place to strive for elegance.
Yes. And what a great segue, because that's exactly what I wanted to open our questioning with, was hearing from you how you became so passionate about bringing in the lessons of performing arts to business.
About 10 years ago, I started taking Latin dance lessons. It stinks to be a beginner guy. You have all the incentives in the world to get up that learning curve really quickly. Within 6 months, I found myself on a dance team, and 18 months into it, I started teaching beginner dance lessons myself. And I started concluding everything I'm learning on the dance floor applies off the dance floor. When you think of hygiene, leading, following, tension, rotation, resilience, I started getting passionate about cross-pollinating and translating those lessons to my teams, to my work, to my organizations, because I felt that the culture traits were really necessary and valuable.
Well, in the title of your book is the word agile. And when you think of innovation, you point out some of the limitations of the language we use. Can you address a little bit about what going beyond that might mean?
Sure. Agile, it was formalized around 2001. I believe the Agile Manifesto was written in 2001. It made sense back then because what teams needed were frequent updates to your web presence. We had words like splash pages, brochureware. Agile made sense in 2001 when there were a lot of new technologies out there, and when the perception was what makes innovation difficult is people. Sorry, I misspoke. What makes innovation difficult is technology. It's 20 years later. Would anyone really say, oh, what makes innovation difficult is the Java? It's just too difficult for us. No, what makes innovation difficult now in 2022 are people. So I believe that Agile has limitations because it's all about the culture of software development. If you read the second page of the Agile Manifesto, uh, to be blunt, some things have not aged well. And so I believe that Agile had its time and place. And I understand the S curve of adoption right now of Agile, it is on the steep slope. You can sneeze and arm fart the word Agile and you can get a job and your methodology is just fine if you can just blow your nose with the word Agile. Agile is about frequency. And if that's what constitutes success, frequency, franticness, fatigue, and burnout, knock yourself out. And what I'm proposing with inspiration from the performing arts is a methodology that's based in minimal marginal cost. With a record, with a movie, just push play. That's low marginal cost. So we can find a ton of inspiration, learning benefits, and profitability from the performing arts, or if you want to expand it a little bit, the empathetic arts, because frequency is not what constitutes success. What constitutes success and profitability and ease and employee experience, it's minimal marginal cost, not just from a finance perspective, but from a labor and effort and clarity for your team. I'll pause there. Is that fair?
What I like about the word transcend is it often includes what came before. And so Agile has its place and it's not the goal in and of itself.
Fair, yeah.
So when I think about, I just visually, I'm thinking performing arts, we've got dancers or musicians playing together. There's this symphonic collaborative component to it, and things won't go perfectly well, right? Like some trumpet's going to be off, or a step will be off, or there'll be a skip somewhere. And yet the really great performers, they quickly adjust, adapt, find their groove, right? Again, like to the audience within moments. Like you might not even notice it, that misstep happened, but of course they know, right? And so liken that now to a business situation. There's a misstep. How do we respond in a similar way to professional musicians or dancers?
A few things come to mind, Adrienne. You're tiptoeing into a topic about errors, and I love to distinguish among sampling errors, kind of one-off stuff, human error, systemic errors, which are not purposeful, but they're repeated, and it's a state of neglect. And that's different than systematic errors, purposeful, mindful, sabotage. So I think that when we talk about empathy, and I think the conversations about empathy are valuable and important and critical, I think a lot of conversations about empathy and culture don't go far enough. For example, I believe that teams need to be able to distinguish among what is a systemic, sorry, let me go in the same order. What is a sampling error? Where is it the trumpet took a breath at the wrong place, or a singer hit the wrong consonant and I heard SSSS across the whole choir. And teams just need to be able to distinguish. What is a sampling error? Like, no big deal. Keep moving on. One of my favorite quotes from, I think, a mid-20th century musician, trumpet player, is it Miles Davis, maybe? One of his quotes is, what makes a note right or wrong is what you do next. So I butchered that quote. It's very Googleable. But that's one point I'd like to make in response to what you said, Adrian, is change professionals need to have a firm distinction. Sampling error, that's a rounding error. No big deal. No one should get crucified for that sort of stuff. But when leaders allow systemic errors to persist and survive, that's expensive in so many ways. And when leaders allow or infuse systematic dysfunction, what are you thinking? Right. So the other point I'll make, Adrian, is you mentioned synchronization. And I think a lot of organizations and change professionals will use that phrase very casually, that phrase in sync. Think of just how valuable synchronization is. Because when you're synchronized, and the visual I like to think about is, think of the busiest intersection in the world. I think of Paris, L'Arc de Triomphe, London, Trafalgar Square, Covent Garden, that sort of thing. And there are plenty of US cities that we could talk about crazy traffic, right? Well, as the intensity of traffic or as the intensity of innovation increases, synchronization matters more. If it's a ghost town and there's minimal traffic, I don't even need a stop sign or a blinking red light in a small town. But as intensity increases, being in sync in that traffic circle, costs really start to magnify. So being in sync, let's not treat that as some casual, hey, are we singing from the same hymnal? Like deliberate, mindful, elegant, painstaking synchronization really brings down costs. It brings down, points of pain for your customer. I'll try to bring this back to a customer centricity or audience centricity. Synchronization is incredibly valuable, pleasant, and profitable. So I just, in response to what you said, Adrian, I just wanted to talk about the distinction of those errors and just how it's not enough to casually refer to these concepts from the performing arts. There is so much value in just immersing yourself and just purposely trying to emulate and imitate. Because if your team is really trying to imitate a symphony, oh my God, you're doing something right. If you're really trying to imitate a theater production and interim milestones and the integration of all the parts of a musical or a play or a movie, oh my God, are you doing something right? And so I just think the examples and the inspiration from the performing arts and the empathetic arts, they're fun, minimal marginal cost, and it's all about the audience. So yeah, again, I'll pause there.
Well, what comes up for me as I hear all that is practice with intention. You can't have any performance without having a clear intention, and you need practice. The distinction between the sample is helpful because in culture, we still need to be humans, and people are on eggshells, afraid to even talk because they might say the wrong thing. Whereas if we know we're coming from a shared value, I can say something and then we come back to the intention and I get a chance to re-say it. But if you think that this is one performance, one and out, it's not going to work. So practice with intention, that's very helpful. Another thing, when you talked about the complexity in the busy intersections, would you address keeping your balance in a fast-moving, complex environment, which is a performing art too? And you mentioned Aikido in your work.
Sorry, my phone is even vibrating too loudly here. So Tom, you mentioned balance. Can you say it again? You're asking
Yes,
about
and
balance?
it was way too long-winded a question. When you mention the busy intersection, what comes to mind is the more complex the system is, you made the point, the more important synchronicity is. But I'm asking a question of the overwhelm of that much input, which is another theater term. The question concisely is, how do you keep team balance, individual balance, or organizational balance in the face of fast moving complex systems?
So I think of two fun examples. Balance. If my response was one word, Tom, it is listening. And we all know that good leaders are good listeners. When there's a lot of commotion and a lot of moving parts, think of an orchestra director who has a bunch of skilled musicians in front of them to the point where he or she doesn't need to be directing. They can drop their hands and just listen. Maybe give visual cues to the orchestra to say, hey, trumpets, can't hear you. Violas, can't hear you. And they're constantly listening and vigilant for balance. Might tell the tubas, chill. And also, if you think of a crowded dance floor, salsa club, swing club, that sort of thing. The DJ is really focused on the music, the performance, and the vibe in the room. But the person organizing or hosting a dance event, there's so much going on in a crowded dance club. People are just starting to, maybe it's the beginning of a song, the middle of a song, near the end of a song. Couples are joining the dance floor, they're leaving the dance floor, they're navigating to the bar, they're coming from the bar. People are blocking, people are annoyed. The self-awareness that everyone needs as everyone's navigating the floor, whether they're literally dancing or whether they're not literally dancing. Every dance couple on the floor, not only are they're aware, they're attentive of how are my mechanics? Am I doing this right? How's my style? Do I look good or do I feel good? Or maybe they're less conscious about themselves and they're focused on their dance partner. Is he or she enjoying this? Are they looking past me, already thinking about their next dance partner? Do they want to hit the bar? Are we coming too close to other couples on the dance floor? Do I even like this song? Is the song too long? Did I leave the oven on? I mean, on the dance floor, there are a ton of things, a ton of inputs that can go on. It's a very complex environment. And if you shrug at staying aware, your personal mechanics might suffer. And all of this, I think, applies to our jobs in change, in teamwork. Your mechanics, you want those to be muscle memory. You want to be so skilled at the mechanics that you don't have to think about it. I think the term is unconscious competence. Mm-hmm. So once you have the mechanics within muscle memory, now you can focus on style, showboating, peacocking, whatever you want to call it.
And you even improvise.
Absolutely. That is the stuff, yes. You can focus on your partner and implicitly or explicitly ask them, are you okay? Yeah, so again, I'll pause there. The dance floor, I think, is a great metaphor for just how much complexity is going on and how much input can you really handle so that you are a good leader, a good follower, a good citizen, a good steward, and really just where are you on Maslow's hierarchy as you're contributing to the dance culture?
Everybody has a role to play, different roles to play on that dance floor, but also collectively, there is a connection between you as an individual in that role you're playing and the rest of the audience. So can you talk a little bit about that connection to the audience or to the customer and how we need to focus on that?
The customer pays the bills. I think there is a lot of valuable parallels between, if you think of the performing arts as the performer audience interaction or the artist audience connection, there are parallels with that and the, I'll call it company customer or innovator customer or individual customer. I mean, the word customer um, in a good way can mean a lot of different things. It's essentially, who do you serve? And, the strictest definition of a customer is a revenue paying customer. But we have customers that it's more abstract than a literal revenue producing customer, right? So when we think of uh, perfectionism, does my customer expect perfectionism? Well, the parallel in the performing arts is, does the audience expect perfectionism? Um, we can think of, in the performing arts, there's this thing called opening night. It's a big deal. And, Tom, to your point earlier about rehearsal and practices, and we can talk about interim milestones and, for a certain performance, we need to be this far by this date and this far by this date. So opening night in the performing arts, the equivalent in the innovation world, in the change world, is a go live date. Mm-hmm. It's a big deal, and and it's the second A of ADKAR. For those listeners who know what ADKAR is, it's the second A of ADKAR. Ability. Do we have the ability to have this customer experience? Am I in the audience? And so I equate the second A of ADKAR, ability, with opening night, and it's a go live date. I think of celebrations. I think of feedback, surveys. So that I would start there with, I think there's a lot of value in just equating whatever a performer would do for their audience, whether it's music, dance, theater, an improv team, imitate that and translate that into your teamwork in the business world. Your customers pay the bills. Your customer might be your boss. However you define customer, you are there to serve them, and you can never lose sight of that.
Well, I heard in your answer the word celebrate, and we heard milestones. I'd like to add in this question about moments that matter. And as context for this, I went to a wonderful concert. My wife took me for my birthday. It was just phenomenal. And the encore still sticks with me. And the crowd was singing along. But the band couldn't have just opened with that encore. It took a lot of moments to get to that, even though that's what I took home as the encore. But it took about 2 hours, and there were lots of little highlights in that show. So talk a little bit in the team context of building in celebration, and they can be small, and creating collaborative moments that matter.
I suspect that a lot of change professionals have a memory of a coworker that's positive, and if and when they have lunch a year later, 5 years later, they will smile and laugh about a certain event, a certain 10-second window with another coworker, where a year later, 5 years later, they can laugh about that event, even if at that time it was positive or negative. But now, they look back with a certain fondness, a certain sentimentality. They appreciate the shared experience, and so moments that matter. If I equate it to the performing arts world, it can be like a melody. As you leave a concert, as you leave a movie, you might remember like the main melody from Star Wars or the main melody from the recent Top Gun movie, that sort of thing. So I think moments that matter is an important thing to remember and keep in mind. So metrics matter. but oh my God, are they sterile? And we can only take the sterile dry stuff so far. And as an engineering undergrad major, I can get into the sterile and the dry, and that's the discipline orientation as well. But moments that matter, you want to surprise and delight your customer. You want to reach the upside of their experience.
It's a shared experience. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And then the glass half empty version is, if your customer has a certain acute point of pain and you alleviate that point of pain, that is also just an inverted way to approach moments that matter. That's a little bit more customer oriented. Back to your point, Tom, about teams. I think that, as we gain experience over the course of our career, we do have multiple events and instances where we had a coworker say something, email something that it has such a positive domino effect for years, or the opposite can happen. So I think that phrase, moments that matter, helps us focus, because it's too easy to boil the ocean and try to fix everything, try to fit everything in one project. And one lesson from the agile world is there's a lot of merit to small, modestly scoped projects. So we don't boil the ocean, and we just focus on one little bit. Like, think of a dance routine where, you know what, it's those 4 beats that we're not getting right. And if we can make that hit, if we can make that move, or in a melody with a symphony or a song, if we can really just hit that note or hit that crescendo, you can have this fleeting 5 seconds, 10 seconds of duration of the performance that blows your customer's mind, it blows your audience's mind. And that's, Tom, the example you remember is that encore has stuck with you and it will never leave you. And it's incredibly inexpensive for you to relive that event.
It's so true.
And it created emotion for you, right? So people will remember how they feel from a conversation that you've had, but they may not remember the exact words that you've said, right? But they will always remember that feeling. And I think, as change professionals, especially as leaders, that's, driving through changes for our people. It's remembering, again, I've said this so many times, it's that whole person, right? And it's getting to the emotions and allowing for those feelings. So we've talked about empathy. We've talked about, awareness of every audience member and where they're coming from. Let's talk. I think we've got to wrap in a couple of minutes.
We've got just a few more minutes, and we'll leave with an open-ended question. But if I could slip one more in, something caught my attention, and that is, you very rarely see the word ruthless and grace together. That got my attention. And I just would like to ask you why you chose those words together, ruthless and grace, which is unmerited favor.
So I'll take baby steps to answer that question. One of the empathetic arts is parenting. As all good parents know, there is a time for bang the table leadership.
Amen.
Good parents know that their kids at some age, at some self-sufficiency level, they need set the table leadership. So those are, is the word reminiscent? Those resemble, right? Bang the table leadership is tiptoeing toward ruthlessness, discipline and ruthlessness. Set the table leadership is tiptoeing toward empathy, freedom, grace.
That is so powerful. And we have to discern which is called for.
Right. To keep kids safe, to keep them disciplined, to let them develop on their own pace, that sort of thing. The reason why I chose the word ruthlessness is because it is more provocative than the word discipline. And I chose the word grace. One reason, because of the syllable count. It's one syllable. And there's like a triple entendre there. In my book, if I personified it and had a protagonist in my book, Her name would be Grace. Grace happens in the performing arts, and in a team environment, when you are forgiving to those sampling errors, it's giving grace to your colleagues. I chose the word ruthless because there's this thing called verb sprawl, where project teams in their task list, in their project plans, might have 30 unique verbs, 40 unique verbs. And you'll glance at this task list or project plan and wonder, how much of this is worth documenting? How much of this is just talk? What of this is anyone going to remember 6 to 12 months from now? So I don't
Guilty.
I don't think it is productive to try to manage and track meetings or email. But what you can plan and track and what's durable is documentation outside email, managed with 5 verbs on 4 rows in your project plan. It resembles a RACI matrix. So I call the 5 verbs a RACI with teeth. 5 verbs: draft, review, revise, approve, distribute. Those 5 verbs on 4 rows of your project plan. You've got dependencies, you've got assignments, you've got durations, and you've got percent complete. You've got high simplicity and transparency on that project plan. So you know who's the bottleneck. You know whose name came off the project plan because of a good reason, worthy reason, or a sketchy reason. It is so disciplined, it is ruthless. Because if someone says, oh, that's overkill, what verb are you willing to do without? Oh, I need more verbs. Please. Ruthless Grace. I think it's a fun this word oxymoron or paradox. And there's
It's provocative. It has built-in dynamic tension, and it elicits a curiosity, because I know what both of those words mean, but I needed to know what they mean together. So good word choice.
It's my way of really dialing up discipline and empathy. Important, critical, very politically correct. But if you want to distinguish yourself, if you want a competitive advantage, if you want a collaborative advantage, if you want to neutralize poor leadership, poor management, you need the right tools and the right metaphors, such as performing arts. When you have the right metaphors and the mindset and the role models of things like the performing arts, your audience is just going to be blown away. And that's why I think it's just such a powerful, fun, enjoyable metaphor.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And we will be certain to include links to your webpage, and we'll promote the book when it's published. And any other things you'd like to direct the audience, send to us, and we'll put them in the show notes.
Thank you.
We look forward to celebrating that book when it launches. Have you back so we can talk about all that. Awesome. Talk about writing a book.
Happy to.
All that goes into that. We know it's a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Robert.
My pleasure. Okay.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Beyond podcast. We hope you benefited from this conversation as much as we have. We invite you to join our community of conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to sign up at aleadershipbeyond.com for free materials and updates. That's aleadershipbeyond.com. Join us in 2 weeks for our next episode.